Good morning, traders. Steve Gans here, and welcome to the weekend update for September 21st. As usual, I'm going to start off with SPX. And a couple things to note here. If I zoom out on this, we can see, of course, that SPX was in this very solid trend channel for quite some time until it dropped out on tariff news. And then it clawed its way back up, ran along the base of this channel, and then finally started popping back into the channel. And now I would say we're firmly back in that channel, which is a pretty bullish sign. We also popped out of this wedge pattern that I drew on here a couple weeks ago, this uptrending wedge pattern. So we're now popped out above the top of that. And again, also a bullish note. Another thing to note here is this extremely high volume on that last Friday. It wasn't a massive up day, but that was some pretty massive volume, specifically in SPX. Now, let's look at SPY, of course, which is going to look very similar. I don't have all the same drawings on SPY because I want to keep one of them a little cleaner, but you can see that we're right back into the center of that channel on SPY. Many times at that center point, you'll get a little bit of a slowdown, a little bit of a chop sideways. So that is certainly possible here. Maybe even a little bit of a pullback possibly, but nothing, again, that I would expect at this point, pending any, of course, news-driven information, that should slow down this progression of our markets. The up volume also was pretty sizable there. So not quite what SPX was, but again, pretty strong up volume in SPY as well. And the S&P futures, very similar pattern here, of course, also breaking out to all new highs in the S&P futures. And overall, the volatility in the S&P 500 is pretty close to all-time recent lows. So volatility not really elevated at all at this point. We take a look at the Qs. We're going to see the Qs actually starting to punch out of the top of their channel, which in the past, when they've punched out the top, they have tended to pull back into the channel a little bit. So while I can see maybe a little more up move in Qs, ultimately I would see Qs probably starting to slow a little bit and maybe pulling back into that channel. But the Qs also were up on decent volume here as well. Also, if we look at RSI, the relative strength indicator, we're up here at almost 74. Now, the Qs have held that very strong RSI for extended periods of time before. So that in itself is not necessarily something saying that it's going to back off. But there's enough things here right now that I'm feeling a little bit of maybe a chop sideways or at least a slowdown of the acceleration rate that's been happening in the Qs here recently. Volatility, not quite at all-time recent lows, but certainly not elevated in any way for the Qs. If we look at IWM is, as I had suggested last week, coming into this prior high area. Now, this isn't all-time highs. We're a little higher back here, but this will provide a little bit of resistance in my mind, that prior level. So I would expect IWM to maybe chop sideways a little bit more. And in fact, I'll be sharing a trade concept or a trade idea with you here in a moment or two on around the IWM. And as always, these are paper trade suggestions for educational purposes only. But we'll take a look at that in a moment. So my expectations on IWM are probably a little more sideways there. And then the volatility in the IWM also pretty much at all-time lows, or all-time recent lows, I should say. Gold continues to be strong. Again, I called this channel a few weeks back. I shared a concept trade on gold with an entry right in that area, expecting to at least get to the top of this channel again and a potential breakout, because many times as you get this sort of a bull flag pattern going, they will often break to the upside as gold did here. So with that, let's circle back to IWM and take a quick look at how I might structure a trade around this. So if my expectation here is that IWM might generally chop sideways, a logical trade to consider here might be something like an iron condor, where I sell a call spread above the market, maybe in that 250 range or so, and I sell a put spread below the market. Probably if I were looking at the IWM pulling back, I think this 235 range or so would be a fairly good range. So I'm looking at a 250 to maybe a 245, somewhere in there. So if I were to come in and lay this out, I would look at something like this, possibly 250. Maybe I could move this up a little bit, but I'm going to leave that about the 240. And you'll notice on this particular trade, this particular concept trade, because our markets in general right now are running more bullish in nature, I am looking to structure this in a way that it has a little bit of positive delta. And that's because while I do expect the IWM maybe to go sideways here, I feel like there's more risk, if you will, of it going higher than there is of it pulling back significantly. Because of that, I'm willing to accept a little bit wider risk on the downside than I'm wanting to accept on the upside. That's just a personal opinion of mine based on where the market is right now. So if we come in and we look at our Greeks, we can see that this particular trade, I would be entering with some positive delta. It's got moderate theta decay. This trade is out 26 days. I could tighten it up, go a shorter period of time, but I adjust these, or I will modify these as the trade progresses if I need to. So in this case, I'm okay going out a little bit further in time here to that 26 day and look at this trade. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to save this trade and my demo paper trades, and I'll just put in here weekend update for 9/21. I will copy the link. I'll share it in the description down below, and you do not need to have an OptionStrat account to click that link and open this up. If you click that link, it's going to open up just like this. Then you can come in, modify this trade in whatever way you might want. Maybe click and drag these things around, decide an alternate game plan that you would like to maybe consider, and then click Save Trade. And then you can modify this or monitor this yourself going forward. So with that, I'm going to wrap up the weekend update here for September 21st. Thanks so much, everyone, for stopping by. If you find this of interest, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up. I'd greatly appreciate it.